So welcome back, dear students, class 11th. We were studying Hornbill, your detailed study book, and we have already started the first lesson, Portrait of a Lady by Khuswant Singh. In the first part of this story, you came to know about the physical appearance of Khuswant Singh's grandmother and his belongingness with her. You also came to know how much he loved his the grandmother, and at the same time there were also the short description of her dress, and that she was very old. She has been beautiful but not pretty. She was always beautiful to the grandson. As you know that it is very common thing that a grandson always loves the grandparents. So she was so old, he says, it is an expense of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. So that was the description. Up to here we have already studied, so we go forward. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayers in a monotonous sing-song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen to get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden still, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, a red pen, and tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. After breakfast of a thick steel chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several steel chapatis with her for the village dogs. In the second part of this story, the writer tells the daily routine of grandmother and his as a child. My grandmother and I were two good friends, so the relationship between the child and his grandmother was like the relationship of two friends. They were very closely related to each other as friends are. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. So the parents of the narrator had gone to some other place because they were transferred. His father was in a job, so the parents were transferred, so he was living in the village all alone with his grandmother. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayers in a monotonous sing-song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen to get to know it by heart. So the grandmother, it was the routine to wake him up, to wake the writer up in the morning and get him prepared him for the school, get him so ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song. So in a very monotonous way, in a very uninteresting way. Monotonous means uninteresting way. She used to sing the morning prayers while she bathed him. Bathed means the verb form of bath. Bath is the verb form. Bath is the noun, and the bathe is the verb. Bathed and dressed him, in the hope that I would listen. It means the writer believes that the grandmother used to sing that prayer in a loud voice because the grandmother wanted to teach that prayer to him. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. So I was very much interested in her voice. I loved her voice, but I didn't bother to learn. Bother to learn means I didn't take any attention. I didn't take any interest to learn that prayer. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk. So she used to go and bring, fetch means go and bring my wooden slate. Slate is a kind of a flat wooden surface on which the children used to write in the past times. पुराने ज़माने में स्लेट होती थी, उनके ऊपर चौक से लिखते थे बच्चे. इट इज़ कॉल्ड wooden slate which she had already washed, जिसको वो साफ किया हुआ रहता उसका, and plastered with the yellow chalk, and it was then plastered means covered. She has painted it with the yellow chalk so that I could write on that. A tiny earthen ink pot. Earthen ink pot means a pot made of soil, जो एक मिट्टी का बना हुआ एक, जिसमें वो इंक डालते थे, एंड अ रेड पेन, तो येलो प्लास्टर्ड रहता था, उसके ऊपर येलो पेन से लिखते थे. सो शी यूज टू प्रिपेयर्ड a slate, a wooden slate, an earthen ink pot and a red pen. Tie them all, उन सबको बांध देती थी मेरे लिए, in a bundle and hand it to me. And then she used to give that bundle of pen, bundle of earthen ink pot and slate to me, to him, after a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little so the butter and the sugar spread on it, we went to school. So after a breakfast of a thick, we used to take a thick stale chapati. Stale chapatis means, stale means the leftover of the previous night. जो पहले शाम की बची चपातीस थी, रोटियां थी, उनको थिक सी मोटी मोटी दादी बनाती थी. And after the breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little so the butter and sugar spread on it. So she used to spread a little sugar and the bread on those chapatis. उन चपातीस में बटर और शुगर स्प्रेड करती. वी यूज टू टेक दैट ब्रेकफास्ट एंड देन go to school. This was the routine. She carried several still chapatis with her for the village dogs. So same chapatis were also given to the village dogs on the way to school. स्कूल के रास्ते में जो विलेज डॉग्स थे उनको भी स्टील चपातीस दादी साथ में ले जाती. Then my grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabets and the morning prayer, while the children sat in row on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayers in a chorus. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time, village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. So in the second paragraph of the story of today, the writer tells about the grandmother going to school with him. So both grandson and grandmother used to go to school together. Why grandmother used to go to school? Because a temple was attached to the school. School और temple दोनों क्या थे? Attached थे. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer. The priest means the person who performs prayer at a religious place is called priest. Priest कौन है? Religious place पे जो prayers को perform करता है, जो पूजा पाठ कराता है. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. So the routine was both used to go to school together. The grandson joined the class, and the grandmother joined the prayer in the morning time. Children sat in a rows. एक लाइन बना के बच्चे बैठते थे. Either side of the veranda के either side means in facing each other to both the sides of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. And chorus means in all together. They all sing the alphabets and the prayer together in a voice, one voice, you can say. My grandmother sat inside, and so the grandmother used to sit inside the temple and reading the scriptures. Scriptures means religious books. So my grandmother used to sit inside the temple, and there she used to study the scriptures. Scriptures means religious books. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. So when we have both finished means my grandmother had finished her scripture, and I finished my school, my class. Then we both come together back to home. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. So whenever we used to leave the temple, so we always met by the village dogs. Village के जो dogs थे वो हमें कहाँ मिलते थे? At the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other. So they followed means they came after us. हमारे पीछे पीछे आते थे to our home, growling. Growling means producing the deep sound through the throat, a deep sound being produced from the throat to terrify someone, especially by dogs, by cats, by wolves, growling. So they followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. We used to throw the leftover chapatis to the dogs, and the dogs used to fight with each other, with one another for the chapatis, and they used to growl. So this was the first phase of the relationship of a grandson with his grandmother when they were living in the village and the parents were living somewhere else. So this is the first phase of the story. Now, with the progress of the story, you will notice that the relationship, the bond between the grandmother and the grandson is changing with the passage of time. So you will notice it. We have already studied the first phase of the relationship between the grandmother and the grandson. The grandmother and the grandson are very friendly at home, at their village, because the parents are living in the city. They are not settled there in the city. As soon as they get settled, they will come back to take both of them. So by the time we start the next part of this story, you will write down some questions. You will prepare some question like suppose the first question is, how did the narrator describe his grandfather? Why he thought that his grandmother can only be the mother, not a wife, not a mother. Third one is, what was the relationship between the writer and his grandmother when they were at village? You can also make some more questions like, why grandmother used to go to school with the writer, with the narrator. So these are the different type of questions. You can frame the questions on your own and you will write the answers by yourself. Other than this, at least you will have to make 4 to 5 questions, then write down all the hard words from this part of the story and as well from the previous part of the story in your notebook, and look the meanings in the dictionary. That's all for now. We will be back soon with the another part of the story. So till then, take care.